Chapter 19. Make a mistake, get up again. I was back in the hot seat at headquarters, and there were moments when the anxiety felt crippling. I was managing dozens of people, raising millions of dollars, and giving hundreds of media interviews and speeches in an effort to shut down the nation's biggest abortion chain. And yet, it never felt like enough. And there was so much room for error. It was all so much simpler when I first started. Back then, I would simply take the next right step, pray on the sidewalk outside a clinic, volunteer at a pregnancy center, or do activism on my college campus. It felt more immediate. I felt like I was personally making the difference in that moment. It felt much more rewarding than giving a speech about how other people should take action, when my action in that moment was just giving a speech. And there was much less risk when I was first starting out. There's a simplicity about having no money and being a college student that few people expect much from. But now that I was the head of a nationally recognized nonprofit, a boss, and a leader in our movement, any mistakes I made hurt that much more. But mistakes were inevitable. The key is that we get up again. To promote the Protect Our Girls initiative, Live Action worked with a PR company and a few other pro-life groups to put together a press conference at which a dozen or so members of Congress would speak. A number of representatives were pushing legislation to ban abortions done because of the sex, race, or health of the baby. And our investigation was an opportunity for them to win support for their bill. The press conference was to be held on the lawn outside the Capitol building at 8 a.m. I set my alarm for 6 o'clock, but ended up hitting the snooze button multiple times. Finally, at 6:30, I pulled myself out of bed and scrambled to get ready. Then ran out the door to call a cab. It seemed like everything that could go wrong did go wrong on the way to the press conference. I arrived at 8:02. A crowd of Congress members stood by the podium, and several media crews and cameras hovered impatiently nearby. I walked up to the congressman who had introduced the new legislation to ban sex-selective abortions and said hello. Everyone was just waiting. It suddenly dawned on me that they were waiting for me to start the press conference. I thought the congressmen were hosting it, but I realized with a wave of horror that I was expected to host. "Are you going to MC?" he asked. "I can," I said hesitantly, "but would you prefer me to?" "I'm fine doing it, but whatever you think," he said, a little flustered. "I'll do whatever you think." "Okay, go ahead," I responded. The congressman took the podium, and started talking. The press conference was smoothly enough from there. Once we finished our statements, we took questions from the press and made small talk until everyone disbanded. Afterward, I hopped in the cab with our communications director, and we headed to our little office. A few hours later, I received a phone call. It was a former congresswoman who worked for another advocacy group that was at the press conference. "Lila," she said bluntly, "you cannot walk into your own press conference late. That is such unprofessional behavior. It is unacceptable. All those Congress members were there for you, and you were the last one to show up." At first, I was taken aback. I didn't know what to say. Then I pulled myself together and mumbled, "Thank you so much for your feedback." I quickly realized she was right. While I felt humiliated, I also knew this was going to help me grow. If she hadn't taken the time to tell me that my lateness reflected poorly on me and our work, I would not have had such an explicit learning moment. Thanks to her intervention, I made sure that I was always on time for subsequent events. That meant getting up earlier, knowing in advance where I was going, and making sure there was margin in my schedule in case something went wrong. I also made sure my staff, and any company that we worked with, knew exactly what to expect and planned for at future events. Of course, after this faux pas, part of me wanted to disqualify myself from doing a press conference ever again. But I realized that when we make a mistake, not my hand right now, when we make a mistake, Real humility comes not by running from the mistake, but by admitting our failure and then addressing the issue so we will be better in the future. We need to allow our mistakes to teach us so we can better teach others. In the same way, we need to be patient with the mistakes of others. Canceling ourselves or others removes all opportunity for change and growth. In my case, no one else was doing what live action was doing, and the world needed more, not fewer activists, even if we were imperfect. We will all make mistakes, perhaps not as public as showing up late for a congressional press conference, but we cannot let our failures derail us. Using a failure as a reason to stop trying is a cop-out. Let our mistakes teach us humility, but never use them as excuses to give up trying. The stakes are too high to take yourself out of the fight. Your cause needs you. Keep going.